Hey there, this is Dan, and you're watching The Salty Sea. I got pretty excited a couple weeks ago when they first showed the new Stormcast for the Dominion unboxing. And while yesterday they showed a few more of those, I'm really excited because they showed a brand new faction to Age of Sigmar, to Warcry, to all this fantasy G GW stuff. So let's get into taking a look at what they showed off and take a look at how it fits into the pantheon of greenskin sculpts that GW's made for us. So they call them cruel boys, and you'll know right away because they've got spikes everywhere. Spikes on top of their backpack skulls, spikes on top of their helmets, spikes on top of their little mounts' tails. Um, I never understood, putting spikes everywhere because they'd just get caught on everything, but it definitely does give you this kind of visual language of uh, yelling out evil right away. These are definitely going for a more grimdark, more sort of serious vibe than they've ever shown with greenskins in Warhammer before, which, isn't a bad thing. It's certainly a new direction, and new is always cool, especially um, for something like greenskins that have gone the same direction for so long. So we're starting out with the Killaboss on Great Gnashtooth. The rumors were right. It is sort of a hybrid between a squig, a wolf, and a bear. So great job, whoever described that. I do like the shields. We'll get more into the shields the more we see, but the shields are sort of the only kind of nod to classic orc fun that they've done with this faction, and I do really like it as an extra touch. Um, Even if I don't necessarily love the paint scheme, I think it's sort of extra grimdark for my, I don't know, part of what I like about AOS is the fantastical nature of it. But they do still have hints of it, right? Like pot grot. Pot grot might just be my second favorite part of this whole release with the Swamp Kala Shaman. Um, and they do, I think, do a great job here of making him um, look very powerful and intense. I kind of like whatever's going on with this bronze hand here that he's got too. And luckily, I mean, this box is incredible in terms of how much stuff is in it. So the characters don't just stop there. We get a Killaboss on foot and a banner holder who I think they call the Merc Knob. Yeah, Merc Knob with Belchabana. Um, this banner is supposed to be Kragnos. I didn't notice a third eye on Kragnos, but I might have just missed it. Um, the tongue is suitably gross. I not looking forward to seeing some people's paint jobs on that one. Not bad paint jobs, just really good paint jobs are going to be pretty gross for that one. But still, these characters are, pretty intense, very detailed, lots of bits and bobs on them. You're gonna want to paint each little rivet. If you're trying really hard, you're going to paint each rivet on these shields separately, and that's going to take you some time. Um, there is sort of a busyness to this faction that, you can love or hate, right? Because if you do love that kind of pick out detail, there's a lot to get into, a lot of different contrasting colors you can do with that. Um, and if you don't, not every faction is for everyone, I suppose. I don't know if it'll be for me, but that's okay. I do like that it looks like you can get two different weapon options with the leader. Whether I want to or whether they have different stats, I think that'll be interesting. And I do want to talk about the actual troops, right? Because the troops are sort of the heart of any kind of new force. They're going to be what you're painting most of all. And they're kind of interesting, right? So this is where I kind of get to having a love-hate relationship with the new faction. I think it's I just want to say I think it's amazing that they've gone in such a new direction with sort of a group, right? The orcs that is really well loved in the game. Um, Even though I'm not the biggest fan of the new direction, I love that it's here, and I've already seen people who are really excited about it who, just liked orcs but just felt they were a little too cartoony to really get into. This is perfect for those folks, and I can't wait to see what some people's takes on serious orcs are. I do think that, these archers, there's just a lot of busy things and detail that are going to go on here. So painting it seems a little daunting just in terms of a time commitment, but I do really love anytime they have crossbows that aren't meant to look like bolters. If you watched my Stormcast review show, where I looked over sort of historical Stormcast sculpts, you'll know that I like my crossbows to look like crossbows, and these definitely do. Um, it's also cool. I think this is one of the only infantry shooting options. If yeah, other than bone splitters, shoot as I guess. Yeah, I guess that's the only one in the Orc War Clans book. They did imply that these would be sort of accessible in Orc War Clans as well as having their own book. We'll see how that actually shakes out. Hobgrots, they have a lot of personality. Not all small troops have that kind of personality, right? Like Shootas and Stabbas don't really, if you're looking at Gloomspike Gits. I think these will be a little bit bigger than Gits are, but um, still small, maybe around the same size as, say, Plague Bearers or something. Um, there is a little bit extra detail compared to a lot of horde units here, but if you're into painting metal, then that'll be good, right? Something where you can sort of speed paint most of it and then take care on just a few things. That can be good for a lot of folks. There's one other troop choice that's available for the Ard Boy or Ard Boys. I have Iron Jaws on the brain. I've been painting them for a while for the Cruel Boys, but we'll get into that later. We'll look at that last. I do think that when I actually paint these, I'm thinking I'll like them a lot better. Like if you're looking at some of these, just with the sort of extra grimdark looks, I'm wondering if maybe that's part of my issue with them. So I'm hoping that if I paint them sort of the color I did for Zarbag's Gits with sort of indigo and yellow, I'll put yellow where the shields and pauldrons are here, here, and then if you look at this guy, right, I'll have that be bright yellow and all of this stuff be kind of indigo, and I'll see how that works, right? If I like painting the Dominion starter box, which I'm pretty committed to getting because I love the Stormcast in it, then I'll right away I'll paint enough for Warcry, and if I keep liking it, then I'll maybe keep making them. They've also got a few bonus models that are going to come out afterwards. I do love the giant artillery piece, actually, the sort of huge quiver of massive bolts. I'm interested to see. They said that it would be both good at taking down monsters and good at clearing hordes, which doesn't seem possible, right? I mean, you can't have a shooting thing just be good at everything. Well, maybe they have done that actually. Who knows? But we'll see. I'm also one of the best sculpts that they've shown. It's not very similar to the rest of them, but it is really cool. Is this Master Blaster sculpt? With the Trogoth, with the guy riding it. He's another kind of boss. I think it's Break a boss. So it'll be interesting to see sort of how the character roles shake out with that, and whether he's sort of a general choice. If maybe you get to add Trogoths into the army, if he's your general, something like that. Who knows, right? All kinds of speculation is allowed. So I did want to try to just spend some time, now that we've seen the new models, just fitting them into the kind of GW canon of different orcs and Orruks and Grots that they have shown, because they've got an incredibly wide range at this point, which is kind of cool to dive into. So what follows is a totally capricious and biased ranking of the best Greenskin sculpts in GW's games. Um, Kind of fun thing whenever you look at greenskins is kind of taking a look at what the creators are trying to trying to communicate with them. Um, so, for example, because this is just a race that's used in so many different fantasy properties, or just stories in general. And so it seems like they play a different role in all of them, right? Like early GW, uh, the orcs were sort of a metaphor for soccer hooligans. Um, they've, some of the early creators have kind of written that down in multiple places, and I think that's really funny. I guess maybe you could call them a little elitist, but I think it's pretty harmless fun being poked at, their own countrymen there. And then, but then you get to the other end of the spectrum where, right, like Tolkien. orcs. They're sort of tortured elves, which is sort of a metaphor. Now, Tolkien always in interviews would say that he abhorred metaphor and hated it in every way, and yet, you know, it was no coincidence how closely some of the conflicts in his stories mirrored the Second World War, um, or sorry, the First and Second World Wars. And you can kind of see a lot of the interwar populace under the torture of um, the interwar economy and the Great Depression, falling for fascism. You can see a lot of that in kind of the orcs. And sorry if that's too serious for a video about uh, giant green fighters, but it's just really interesting, seeing how he did that and then how that kind of translates into the stories. Um, but then you also have things like D&D where, they actually are in the middle of completely changing and revamping how they communicate orcs in their setting, because there were a lot of worries that, you could see if you wanted to like racist caricatures in the way they treated some of those orcs. And, I don't play D&D, so I can't specifically speak to it, but I can kind of see where people are coming from with those. Again, I wasn't leveling those criticisms at D&D, but only because I just don't know the setting that well. So that's a really interesting thing that, the company themselves actually said that they were changing them in response to those sorts of criticisms. So there's a lot of different directions it can go to, but for this review, I am going to not include these two. I knew when I made the countdown that, someone would point them out and be like, hey, these are the two best. Why haven't you included them? Um, these are not orc sculpts. I'm sorry, right? Gordrak is a bulldog dragon. He's not an orc. The Maw Crusher is the star in the Gordrak sculpt, and same is true with Gazgul, right? Gazgul's not really an orc. Gazgul's a robot. He's a robot with an orc head, and he's still cool. I think that there's sort of a lot you can get into on this sculpt. I think it's really sort of menacing and dynamic at the same time, which is cool and not always easy to do with chunky things. But again, not an orc, it's a robot. Wanted to get to some honorable mentions. This Gloomspike gets one. It falls under the same flaw as those last two that I had with the Mangler Squigs. The star here is the Squigs, right? These are not really This is not really a goblin sculpt. This is a Squig sculpt. But they just did such an incredible job here, turning just blobs of red into something really exciting. Um, Same is true with the Squig truck in 40K. I absolutely love it. I love how there's dudes sort of stuffing squigs into guns. There's squigs sort of everywhere on the truck, and then the proportions of the truck are very chunky and very like, they fit with what the orc aesthetic has always been. Finally, the really recent Underworlds Bone Splitters tribe, um, sort of miniature warband. They do a really good job talking or showing what bone splitters are all about, right? There's this guy with the dragon skin pelt here. He's got like teeth that are shaped like daggers that he's put under his skin instead of pockets, which is real intense, and I admire him for it. I mostly actually don't love the bone splitter aesthetic, but these ones are still just really well done executions of what's going on with them. So I want to start just number 6. I went for a top 5 and then couldn't pick. But Flash Gits, these are really old sculpts, but they just hold up really well in my opinion. Especially the leader. He's got a pirate hat. They've actually modeled the casings flying off the gun as he shoots it. Just a really incredible sort of set of artistic choices here that I think make these really ancient sculpts hold up really well into the modern era. And I think if I'd been painting or playing at the time, I think I would have been absolutely blown away by them. But then getting into the sort of top 5 proper, we've got Gore-gruntas. I'm actually painting some Gore-gruntas right now. My wife and I call them little trundlers because they just do such a great job. The Gore-grunta pose is not very dynamic, right? They're just kind of stodgy actually, and yet they still manage to sort of communicate this unstoppable momentum as they just kind of trundle along. Like when you hold them in your hands, you know right away this is supposed to be a heavy cavalry that's not that fast, but should be just unstoppable once they get to their location, and should still be faster than anybody just two-legged on foot. And I just think that that's a really incredible job, kind of communicating something um, with a pose without it being sort of these crazy pirouettes and stuff that a lot of the more recent models, the way they kind of communicate dynamism is with just sort of really exaggerated poses. And the whole Iron Jaws aesthetic manages to um, really communicate a really strong vibe without actually doing any of that, right? They're not just like hulking and menacing. They've got kind of a real character to them, even though their poses are, like what I said before, just you could call them stodgy, even though I don't think that that would be fair to what's going on. Um, the other cool thing about these is the texture contrast between the fur of the boars and the armor plates sitting on top of them. Um, Actually makes them really fun to paint. Next is the Gobapalooza. I had just had to put them all in one one section. Since they're in the same box, they can all be called one sculpt, right? The cool thing about the Gobapalooza is that I had been very bored of Grots generally. Like with Gloomspite Gits, I love their aesthetic, but it's really a squig army. It's not really a goblin army. Um, Except for these guys, right? Because I couldn't even imagine that grots could be this kind of flavorful until I saw what was in this box. So I really love that, and I just really love, what they managed to do with these. Uh, the guy on the brain mushroom is by far my favorite, just with all the different things that are going on. This mushroom bat, the staff he's got, the brain mushroom, his face, whatever's going on with his face is really funny. Um, so yeah, these are absolutely adorable everywhere. Next is the new Beast Snagas. They have rocket boosted spears, which is kind of all you need to know, right? Um, Now, I love Gore Gruntas, but these might just come ahead of them just because Squigs might just be cuter boars, which isn't fair because boars are really cool in their own way, but it's hard to look at those Squigs and not just be in love with them. The other interesting thing about this is that, so like the basic Squigs in Gloomspite Gits, I just don't like at all. They're just little meatballs. Um, but I'm really impressed with how GW in some of their more recent sculpts manages to make squigs fun, even though they're just little red blobs. And this is one of the best examples, right, where um, the different sort of squig riders that they've got in this release uh, all show really dynamic squigs, despite them still essentially look at that. It's still basically just a meatball. So really interesting. They also do a great job with the basic boys, with their kind of dragon hide cloak here, and then the little bit of armor, not actually very much, but the weapons I think are really cool. So just a really great update to the 40K version of Orcs. Finally, we've got the Gut Rippas. Well, next to finally. And I'm just blown away by these, right? Because for the most part with the Cruel Boys, I'm not that big a fan of the aesthetic, but the rumors about them beforehand were that they were kind of going back to Lord of the Rings orcs, and I think these are the ones that really nail it the best, even being sort of a vast improvement, I would say, on the Lord of the Rings aesthetic. Um, they're mean. They're still fun because these shields match all of their faces, right? Like the eye patch guy, his shield has an eye patch. Um, the guys with like helmet areas, there's rivets on the shield where their helmet is. Um, you know, the guys without them don't have the rivets, right? It's just really incredible. The faces just matching the shields is just really incredibly done. And then the rest of the poses, right? They're not quite hulking, but they are very menacing and intimidating. They look like they know what they're doing, right? So they aren't just going to be kind of mow over orcs the way um, all the orcs that aren't Iron Jaws tend to be in the game. I mean, who knows what the actual stats are, but they don't look like they're guys you just run over, right? Um, and then I actually really do like the hanging leather here. I think a lot of the characters for the Cruel Boys are just a little bit too busy for me. But these guys, if you settle on a leather recipe that you really like, um, you're going to be able to actually paint these relatively quickly. And they're just going to look, I think, really great, especially if you get a leather that contrasts really nicely with whatever you choose for the orc skin and then the shields. Whatever your kind of three-step color scheme is for that, I think if you get something you really like, I think you're going to pull off something really incredible with this unit. So I'm really into this, really excited to paint several of them for Warcry, and then see how I feel about them, and then keep going if I like it. Uh, yeah, best part of the reveal yesterday by far was the gut rippas. Finally, in my opinion, the very best Greenskin sculpt in all of Games Workshop is the Mega Boss on foot. Um, there's a reason it won a bunch of painting awards back in the day. I've got the GW one here on the left, and then I've got the Golden Demon 2017 winner here uh, on the right. As you can see, kind of what some of the top painters, although the one on the left was also painted by one of the top painters in the world, but yeah, just showing you like a totally different take from GW and what you can do with these. There's a perfect balance of texture and kind of what I call canvas space, or space with where a really great painter can really show off either creating values like this guy did, right? Like this guy was really playing with how the light would catch the armor. Um, but you could also use this as an opportunity to freehand or, um, to do what they did of like really intense weathering on the armor, right? You can just go crazy with these. And yet, if you don't want to do that, you don't have to. You can absolutely kind of like speed paint this guy and he'll still look amazing because of all the texture on him, right? So like a wash will settle really well. Same with a dry brush. A dry brush will pick out the sort of ridges in the armor really, really well. So I, if you heard my Stormcast video, you know that that's one of the things I value above all is something that um, can look okay in the hands of a novice and incredible in the hands of a master. Um, and the Mega Boss does that, right? Not every unit that is easily paintable by novices is something that you can really raise to an incredible level. Like, for example, I think my bloodletters look pretty good, and I'm not the best painter, but nobody's going around and winning painting competitions with bloodletters. Um, the same is not true of this guy. This is just an incredible example of, what a character can be in any faction, right? Like almost every faction should be striving to have like one guy with this kind of level of yeah, sculpting. I don't know. This is a painting hobby, right? Not for everyone, right? There is a game to it, and most of my videos are about the game. But as far as the painting and modeling part of the hobby, this I think is the absolute pinnacle of what GW can achieve. They've got a few things like this in both of their ranges, 40K and AOS, and I just love it whenever they pull something off like this. All right, so there we have it with the new Cruel Boys. I am excited about them, partly just because I love the Gut Rippas so much, but I'm excited to see kind of what other people do with their takes on it. I think the Master Blaster is probably my second favorite, thinking over it. So let me know in the comments which ones are your favorites, or also with the countdown, which Greenskin sculpt is your favorite of all the orcs, goblins, and Orruks that the Games Workshop has ever produced. I'm going to be back to some more tactical Warcry content, uh, finishing off my math video, and then a competitive tier list in the future. So until then, may all your rolls be crits.